A revolutionary. Say whoa. Trap revolutionary. Got the wave of too scary. Doing this thing like Malcolm ain't by any means necessary. We ain't got it by no one seen hand. We got the master plan. Get the move.
What's going on, y'all? Y'all want to do this video real quick about the ongoing war in Iran. Pete Hegseth just said so far the U.S. has spent about $37.5 billion on the war and ongoing costs that would be incurred. They're actually asking for a budget for next year's budget, $1.5 trillion. Also, it has been said they have not. The Pentagon has about 75 billion that they have not spent. That was basically that the department had in place for a possible, I want to say like a possible budget for defense that they hadn't used, so they was actually the Senate committee was asking them about that and why they had not spent that particular budget. But Pete Hegseth said in the next year they would end up spending that with 75 billion. So it's a lot of money being spent, and basically a lot of taxpayers' dollars are going to the war.
Secretary Hegseth, if you listen to my comments, you would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. The word heard. I heard exactly what you said.
I will tell you how I use the word failure, because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership? When will you show leadership?
Why don't you show some leadership and stand up to your fellow Democrats who won't fund the troops, who stand and play partisan politics while you don't give us the money?
Now, what happens if we come home and end the blockade to the world?
Sir, Iran has the potential to continue to be a threat.
We need some hard answers and some straight talk. What will happen, Pete?
Senator, I would agree with the chairman, but the likely outcome is they would try to impose their will on the waterways.
We need straight answers. We need straight answers. Do we have the ability to destroy whatever is underneath Pickaxe Mountain?
Senator, a lot of our capabilities are classified, but if anybody in the world can reach anything on God's green earth, it's the United States military, the most powerful military in the world. It's all about options and trade-offs.
You are asking for unlimited money for bombs when people can't feed their families. And I don't know how this administration intends to defend those decisions to the American people.
Not unlimited bombs, Senator. I'm asking for the right bombs at the right time.
So, and I want to report on this because, just from the jump, like the whole conflict didn't have to happen, because for one, United States is saying that Iran, was building a nuclear weapon, that they were, didn't want them to have a nuclear weapon, and the reason they were so strong on that is because there have been things, made, I guess, like, there have been basically things said against the United States. I know Ayatollah Khomeini, he had made threats like, death to America. And those things were said, from what I understand, because he felt like America was an imperialist country, and also, a country that had, basically over the, course of his time, I just told him many in Iran, the one that they actually killed in the first strikes, he felt America was, basically a hegemony, imperialistic power that, sought to control their country and also other countries, at the expense of those countries and the exploitation of those countries. So, that is what has happened, and it has been just an ongoing battle, And I don't want to be like I want to try to present the facts. And I'm upset about it, like very upset about it, and I try not to be upset. But a lot of these things are happening. I just told our lead committee. So he was killed in the first strikes. That was what, February 28th, 2026. So they assassinated him with the first strikes in Tehran, and amongst a number of other leaders. He was assassinated, and for what I understand, actually, it was said that the reason the U.S. had success in that strike is because Iran's own leaders were going back and sharing information to the Israeli military forces or whatever, and they were able to have a successful strike because of that information. So basically their Iran's own leaders were sharing with Israeli forces, so they were able to pinpoint their strikes and strike Tehran, in Tehran where those military leaders were, and pretty much pinpoint where they were and kill them, basically wipe them out. But like I said, the thing has been that it's been a back and forth with the United States continuing on with this war, and it's just very costly, and it's going to continue to cost, and get. I think honestly, I don't think the money that they are asking for, it's what they spent and also what they're asking for. So it's a supplemental request for $67 billion, which they're saying to help cover the Iran conflict, right? And then another 1.5 trillion to cover costs for the following year, the next year. They say the Pentagon already has like 75 million or so. They have that as a money that has already been allocated, and why they haven't dealt with that or used those funds. They just said they are planning, I guess, coming up, that those funds are going to be 95% of those funds are going to be allocated, which Hegseth, Pete Hegseth said 95% of those funds will be allocated, by September, if I'm not mistaken. So it just seems like, man, a lot of this money is being used on a war, because when you look at it from this perspective, used on a war that the U.S. didn't have to engage in. And it's an issue of sovereignty, because if Iran is a sovereign country, they should be able to have the military prowess and weaponry that they desire to have without someone telling them that they can't. I don't know of any treaty or any international law in place or NATO any type of NATO agreement that said that Iran is not sovereign, or they cannot, based on any NATO agreement, any type of military international rule or law or agreement, that they cannot be, or that they are not sovereign and they cannot possess a nuclear weapon. So looking at it from that perspective, and if that is not so, then they can and they are able to determine whatever weaponry they want, to have, Now, if it's a problem where they are threatening, the United States to actually wipe out the United States, then okay. There were statements made by, like I said, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, death to the United States. And that was because the United States, being an imperial, basically imperialist nation, wanting to dominate and control other nations, countries, and basically to exploit other countries as well. You know what I'm saying? And I know that was the reason. Had the United States not engaged in a imperialistic platform and program, and to dominate other countries for their resources, exploit other countries for their resources, you wouldn't have that problem. First and foremost. So it's that's the problem. That's the problem we're having. You're asking for 67 billion right now, and another 1.5 trillion on top of that. You spent 37.5 billion. You already have 75 billion Pentagon, right? The Pentagon, the War Department, for I understand, they have 75 billion right now. Basically, I guess a Pentagon, they said a previous reconciliation package that they haven't spent, but Pete Hegseth said that 95% of that reconciliation money will be spent or allocated by the end of this September. You do have senators saying that, Senator, I believe her name is Mary Collins or whatever. She said, like, well, hey, I don't want to like hold the military up, because money has to be spent, bills have to be paid for the war, whatever Susan Collins, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine, so she's kind of like on the side of, hey, give them the money basically, because right now the money's gonna have to be spent anyway. It's the war's ongoing, it's in place, it's things are already set in motion, so there's no need in denying it. But then you have people like I believe his name was Gary. He's a Democrat out of Michigan. He was like basically having it out with Pete Hegseth about this whole thing with the war and the spending of the money. Senator Gary Peters, the Democratic Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, and he's saying like Pete Hegseth, he's like you a failure. You know what I'm saying? He was like basically having it out with him on the floor saying, oh well, Pete Hegseth saying, oh you don't support your military members of the country. He said you're gonna call them a failure. He said no, I'm not calling them a failure. He said basically this war is a failure. You are a failure. Because the leaders in place have failed. The military. Those people, saying those men and women on the front lines and sacrificing their lives, the ones that have lost their lives because of y'all's failure, the leadership failure, to actually lead in the proper manner, the whole war effort. Y'all don't have a plan. It's just, y'all keep saying, okay, we've damaged Iran's infrastructure, military infrastructure. Then you come back and say, oh, well, we didn't bomb everything. We didn't get their, some of their bombs, some of their, missile capabilities because they're hidden underground. So they're basically saying, okay, well, you're telling us this, but then you're saying y'all don't weaken the infrastructure, but then you're coming back to us for money. Then you're saying that y'all didn't weaken the infrastructure. They still have some, basically military capabilities to actually bomb and do damage to the United States and other countries that allies of the United States in that area. That United States may have bases or whatever military, operations, set up at. So, that's, one of the things, and then Pete Hegseth, he's like, oh, they spent 47 years building, basically a terrorist organization and military so they can just continue to terrorize. She's making up lies, and it's costing, us, as a nation. When this money could be allocated toward building the nation instead of built, of you, pretty much wanting to go to war, into warmongering, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's the problem, man. And I said, I try not to be upset about it, but I know that the leaders, the so-called leaders we have in place, they're not leaders. They're basically bent on somebody, they're bending to somebody else's will. Same thing with Trump. They're bending to Trump's will. Trump is bending to Israel's will. And it's basically warmongering. Fear-mongering and warmongering instead of actually, using the money to build up America. They talking about making America great again. And like I said in the video before, you're not making America great. You're making enemies. You're going to war, spending money on a war that never even had to happen. Because if there are no international treaties, or no form of like I said, NATO agreements or restrictions or whatever it may be, that says that Iran cannot have is not a sovereign nation, then that's a problem. That's a problem. Because y'all pretty much done lied to everybody. And y'all wasting taxpayers' money. And I know people probably get on here and say, oh, well, I'm just being opinionated about it. I don't know what I'm talking about it. But the fact is, this whole war has been fought over lies. Another thing, saying that they are not sovereign. If that's not in place, man, y'all are in violation, total violation, of any type of international, like say, law, any agreements that have been established, because if they are sovereign, then they have the ability to have their own weaponry. You know what I'm saying? So y'all go over there and start a war and start bombing them. And the fact is, y'all were in meetings, and y'all bombed them while y'all were meeting, basically to negotiate about the nuclear program that they had. They didn't per se have a nuclear weapon, but to negotiate about their nuclear program, and about them having a nuclear program, or possibly, having any form of uranium or enriched, uranium or plutonium or whatever to create a nuclear weapon. So, that's the issue. You know what I'm saying? It's like, man, this war didn't even have to be, it ain't started. You know what I'm saying? So that's money wasted. And like I said, y'all done further made them a greater enemy and have not done anything to build a country up. That's what I'm saying. Y'all talking about making America, this is the Trump administration talking about make America great, and you have not made you've not made the country great. You've done nothing to make the country great. You know what I'm saying? You've actually made the country worse. You made the country worse, even foreign policy. It's worse. You know what I'm saying? We could have been working towards finishing negotiating with Iran, on to the next, man. Bringing resources back to the country to build a country up. Could have been putting that money into the country, into the people of the country, building the country up, making the nation great. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said in the prior video, we got a president that's all about enriching himself instead of enriching the people of the country. That's how you make the nation great. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to say this because it seems like we got people in place that are incompetent. Made a video even about Mississippi. You know, talking about the Nolan Wells case, how the people in political, well, offices, like I said, that's a political office, basically, in the corner hole, they have to be voted in. But people in the positions of authority there are incompetent, ruling hangings and drownings and certain incidents that appear to be homicides as accidental deaths, you know, or suicides. So incompetency all the way around, because people are basically on a platform of bias, a division, instead of a platform of progress, you know, and godliness. You'd rather stump down on the people, and that's whether here or somewhere else globally, on a platform of exploitation, because you want to basically be the only one that can have a privilege, basically, of what you want to have. And so you would deny everybody else the right to have so you can have that privilege. That's the problem. That's the problem. You know what I'm saying? And that's the reason I say, man, it's like, it's incompetency all the way around. You know, from the local level to the state level to the federal level. So that has to change. You know what I'm saying? We can make this whole, make the whole nation great, whole country great, you know, based on a platform of progress and helping the people. And then even not only here, around the world. That's the platform. That's how you make America great. Not by you stumping down on the people here, you stumping down on people everywhere else, to exploit and take their resources because you want to have the privilege and you want nobody else to have it. You know, as long as you have it, nobody else, you good. Yeah, you can't win like that. You'll never win like that. You know, you always screaming about God bless, and I pray somebody in the Trump administration, whoever, see this video. You always screaming, God bless America. God ain't blessing America because you on demon time. You are on, I will take, I will pillage, I will rob, I will violate, I will kill, I will steal so I can have more than anybody else. As long as I got it, I'm good. And you will treat anybody else any type of way so you can have it. No. God not blessing that. That's the truth. God not blessing that. That's just what it is. You know, but you know, this has to change, you know what I'm saying? And that's why I said, you know, it's incompetency all the way around. Like I said, local, state, federal, and it has to change. And I'm not getting on here just to say it, but it has to change, you know. And until we weed that out, this whole philosophy and thought that I would exploit others for my own gain, until we weed that out, man, this country gonna keep going down. But yeah, I had to get on here and say that, man, because it's ridiculous. You know, this whole thing, man, it's really ridiculous and it has to change. But anyway, man, I'm gonna get up off here. I had to get on here and say that, you know, because, you know, it's just getting to a point to where, man, it's like, yeah, something has to change. You know, we can't continue to let people that are incompetent be in positions of power, you know, holding offices that could affect everybody, not just them. I'm talking about everybody in the country and other people in the world, you know, because we're not the only people in the world. And you got other people in America that are other places in the world, you know. And as I said that in the video as well, you know, you got people that could get targeted simply because they're from America. They're in other countries, but you got people like this making these foolish decisions. They'll get somebody hurt because they'll target them since they know they're from America, just to have some get back, some form of get back. You know, no matter how big or small, some form of get back. But anyway, man, let me get up off here. I just had to get on here and say that. Yeah, like let's work to make a change, and let's work to make a change and get the people that are incompetent out, like for real, because, and I would say this, I can do a better job than that. Like, I'm so serious. People like, oh man, you tripping. I can run a government better than that. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously. Cause I just need 30 days. Give me a month. And how you set the world back on its proper axis? Say, we gonna give y'all what's y'all's. Matter of fact, we gonna help y'all get what's y'all's. We gonna form negotiations to make sure that what's y'all's is y'all's and what's ours is ours. And going forward, we're gonna even make everything that y'all supposed to have, we're gonna make sure y'all get it. You know what I'm saying? That's how you negotiate. We ain't got no beef with y'all. We gonna work this out. We gonna work together. Cause we all in this together. You know what I'm saying? We not trying to take nothing from y'all. We don't, matter of fact, we don't even want it. We don't even want it. We want y'all to have what y'all want to have. That's just what it is. You know what I'm saying? That's how you keep the world on its proper axis. You come with a giving spirit. A spirit of helping instead of taking, man. You know what I'm saying? That's all the way around the world. Out here as well. Giving people back what you owe them. Same thing with us. When we talk about reparations. Everybody always say, oh, well, black people ain't getting reparations. But they've given reparations. Reparations have been given, The internment camps, when Japanese Americans put in internment camps, World War I, I think World War I and World War II, when they thought it was going to be some type of uprising, the Japanese Americans or whatever was going to, do something here because of the war. It was going to be some type of subversive movement from Japanese Americans being here. So they put them in concentration camps. Those people were paid. That's a form of reparation. That's an example that happened here. So you can't tell me when people say, oh, we the black people not getting reparations, they'll never do that. No, they've given reparations to people. Like they don't give reparations to anybody. They've done it. So that's why I said, yeah, we supposed to have that. They've done it before. That's an example that has already been. Also, like I said, even with Jews, Germany still getting paid. Jewish people getting paid from the Holocaust. So in these forms of reparations that's been paid on a large scale, from a smaller scale to a large scale. So people can't tell me reparations can't be given. That's just what it is. It's just the fact that, you don't want to do it. You got people in place that have continued to be in place that don't want to do it, until you force their hand. So something has to be done in that sense to force their hands, So even in that sense, you give people back. You want to be in a spirit to help people. You give people what they should have, and then you help them. If we was in that spirit of helping people all the way around the world, you think people want to attack America? You think Ayatollah, like I'm saying, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the one they killed in the strike, you think he'd been saying death to America? If we was in the spirit of helping and giving to help other countries, it wouldn't be like that. So that's why I said, I'm not just on here talking, just like, oh, this dude don't know what he's talking about. No, I'm talking about that's how you rule a country, and even globally, to be a global power. You rule in a spirit of democracy and diplomacy. But anyway, man, I'm gonna get up out of here. I just had to say that, man. It's so much to hash out, but I can keep going. But that's the main points I had to make, man. It's got to be a change, man. And I'm here. I'm gonna fulfill my purpose to change. Yeah, I have to do it. Even right here, saying this, getting on here, and sharing what I know, could spark a change. But anyway, I'm gonna get up out here. I had to say that. I hope y'all out there doing well, living life full of love and happiness. Doing great, strive for greatness every day. I appreciate y'all out there liking, sharing, comment on the videos. We can agree. Like I said before, we can disagree. We disagree, we can hash out. I just ask y'all to be respectful and be respectful toward y'all. But let me get up out here, y'all. Like I said to Nick, y'all, love y'all. All right, y'all.
Fuck it, go ahead and blow off the dough. Step through the maze, man, and became amazing. About to rewrite history and change a page in a crooked book that never told us the true story. Like how we were kings and queens before the slave story, before the killing, stealing, and drug dealing on some real shit. We ran the world.